طيب erythrocytes, also known as red blood cells, we'll talk about their characteristic or general information about them, how they are produced, and anemia, a disorder with red blood cells. General characteristic. The main function of red blood cells is transport oxygen around our body, or transport oxygen to cells and tissues. There are some certain structural characteristics with the red blood cell that will ensure that this red blood cell will transfer oxygen as best as it can. How is that? طيب. Red blood cells have a shape of biconcave discs. They're actually small, but their shape is biconcave disc. So let's write biconcave disc. So this is a disc, and concave means there is a central depression. The depression will be in here. So this area will look like this. This peculiar or weird shape of the red blood cell will cause the red blood cell to have more surface area, and more surface area will cause increase in gas exchange. So this is helpful for the red blood cell to have more gaseous exchange. Also, the red blood cell is anucleate and it has very few organelles. Also, the red blood cells, they don't have mitochondria. Why is that? Well, mitochondria will cause cells to produce ATP by an aerobic pathway. Aerobic means it uses oxygen. But when the red blood cells, they don't have mitochondria, they're not going to produce ATP by using oxygen there, because they will produce ATP but without using oxygen. So now we're ensuring that the red blood cells are not using the oxygen they're transporting. تمام? So how much red blood cells do we have? We actually have many red blood cells, and per millimeter cube we have about 4 to 6 million red blood cells, and to each white blood cell we have about 1000 red blood cells. طيب. Now we said red blood cells transfer oxygen, but they only transfer oxygen because they contain a molecule called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a protein that contains iron. This protein, or hemoglobin, it can bind to 4 oxygen molecules. And the red blood cell, it doesn't have only one hemoglobin, it has about 250 million hemoglobin. So it's like a bag filled with hemoglobin, and this hemoglobin that's inside this bag is going to attach to oxygen. Each hemoglobin attached to 4 oxygen. So if this red blood cell contains 250 million of hemoglobin, how much oxygen do you expect to be inside? It's about 1 billion. But we're not going to measure it this way. We measure hemoglobin in 100 milliliters. Usually we have about 12 to 18 milligrams of hemoglobin per 100 milliliters. In men, usually it's between 13 to 18, and in women it's between 12 to 16. Okay, the production of red blood cells. We have something called hematopoiesis. Hematopoiesis means formation of blood cells. Could be white blood cells, could be red blood cells. Then we have something called erythropoiesis, which means the formation of red blood cells or erythrocytes. Where does erythropoiesis happen? Erythropoiesis happens in the red bone marrow, which is in the axial skeleton and girdles. Axial skeleton means the vertebra, the ribs, and the skull. Girdles, you have bones of the shoulder, which are the scapula and the clavicle. Just know axial skeletal, girdle, and it also happens in the epiphysis of the humerus and femur. Epiphysis means the end of bones. Let's say this is a bone, and let's say this is the end of the bone. This is the epiphysis. So we said epiphysis of the humerus and femur, and the axial skeleton and girdles. So the production of red blood cell will happen from this is the main stem cell or the mother cell. The stem cell can be differentiated to many different cells, but it will differentiate to a cell that will be committed to only produce red blood cells, which is called the proerythroblast. The proerythroblast is committed. Committed, it means that it will only form a red blood cell. But the hemocytoblast, it can form different kinds of cells. It can form, for example, white blood cell. Then the proerythroblast will change into early erythroblast. So we will have here phase 1. What will happen in phase 1, that in the early erythroblast we're going to have ribosome synthesis. Then the early erythroblast will change into late erythroblast and normoblast, in which we will have phase 2. What will happen in phase 2 is we will have hemoglobin accumulation. After that, we're going to have ejection of the nucleus, which is phase 3. Phase 3 is ejection of the nucleus. Which will lead into formation of a cell called the reticulocyte. So first we have synthesized ribosome that happened in the early erythroblast. Then we were accumulating hemoglobin, which happens in the late erythroblast and normoblast, and then there will be ejection of the nucleus. This ejection of the nucleus will lead into formation of a cell called the reticulocyte. Reticulocytes are immature red blood cells. They will circulate in your body, and then they will mature into erythrocytes or red blood cells.